With Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to... Has anyone seen the bride and groom?
Sorry, we're here. We were getting lucky in the limo and we lost track of time.
No, Lucky Land Casino, with cash prizes that add up quicker than a guest registry.
In that case, I pronounce you lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Daily bonuses are waiting. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Hello and welcome. It is Eric Erickson here, the third hour of the program. Glad to have you with me. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. We got some breaking news happening, and I'm having my trouble wrapping my mind around it. The Biden administration has just asked oil and gas companies to help lower fuel costs. Reuters breaking this news. The White House has been speaking with U.S. oil and gas producers in recent days about helping bring down rising fuel costs, according to two sources familiar with the matter. Energy costs are rising worldwide, according to Reuters, in some cases leading to shortages in major economies like China and India. In the United States, the average retail cost of a gallon of gas is at a 7-year high. Winter fuel costs are expected to surge, according to the Energy Department. So, therefore, the White House is asking energy companies to do what they can to lower costs. U.S. crude oil recently hit $80 a barrel. A buddy of mine is in San Francisco this week. He sent me a picture yesterday from a gas station in San Francisco where a regular gallon of regular unleaded gasoline is $4.50. No. That's wrong. Hang on a second. Where's his email? I think it was $5.50. It was on the verge of being $6 if it was premium unleaded. Let's see. Let me pull up his text message here. Yes, here we go. Screenshot, text message, pull up the picture. Yep. It was $5.65 for a gallon of regular unleaded gasoline in San Francisco, downtown San Francisco. It was $5.99 for premium unleaded. Now, California has other problems, but it's happening nationwide. I was in Atlanta the other day and paid over $4 for a gallon of gas. Inflation is a problem for the Democrats right now. And so they're desperate to do things. But how can you expect the gas petroleum industry to bail you out when you are the one who screwed them over and drove up their costs by canceling pipelines, increasing regulation, and other issues that have caused costs to go up domestically? OPEC's not bailing you out, and you've scuttled the American energy industry. This is part of what the Biden administration wanted. Everyone told them what would happen, and they decided it would push everyone to battery-powered cars quickly. But guess what? The poor can't buy the Tesla, Mr. President. The Labor Department reported inflation numbers. The CPI-U index rose 0.4% in September. Prices for food and shelter leading the way, a 5.4% increase year to date. Energy prices have risen 25%, food prices up 4.6%. The government is having to boost Social Security payments by 5.9% in 2022, the highest increase in nearly 40 years, so that senior citizens on a fixed income aren't punished by inflation. The data is striking. We have a worker shortage. We have a supply chain disruption. The president and the Democrats are doing their best now to manage supply chain expectations. All of this is coming, by the way, while they're still trying to argue over a reconciliation package that's going to dump more money into the economy. And it's the dumping of excessive funds into the economy that really stirred up inflation to begin with. They've been saying it's transitory, but it's looking less and less like it actually is transitory. Costs are up across the board. It is not a good situation for the American consumer, for the American taxpayer, for really anyone else out there right now. The amount of cost of goods and services, let me read you this. Rental cars up 43%, the cost of a rental car. Cost of gas up 42%. Cost of used cars up 24%. Cost of bacon up 19%. Cost of hotels up 18%. Cost of beef up 18%. Cost of pork up 13%. Cost of eggs up 13%. Cost of TVs up 13%. Cost of children's shoes up 12%. Cost of furniture up 11%. Cost of new cars up 9%. Cost of chicken up 8%. Cost of apples up 8%. Restaurant prices up 5%. Electricity up 5%. Rent up 2.9%. Everything increasing over last September. And this is what the leftists said they wanted in the Green New Deal. That's what people are dancing around here. This is what they want. Why? Because they believe higher prices will incentivize people looking for alternatives. And if those alternatives are more vegetables over beef prices up 18%, well, then maybe they'll discourage beef. There's a story actually out right now. Where is this? Yes, this is from Great Britain. Steaks could soon become champagne-like luxuries. This is from Bloomberg. The boss of Europe's top meat processor said beef will become a luxury like champagne because of the climate impact of producing it. Beef is not going to be super climate friendly, Danish Crown Chief Executive Officer Jes Valeur said in an interview with Danish newspaper Berlingske. It will be a luxury product that we eat when we want to treat ourselves. Valeur said pork will be a more climate-friendly protein. Danish Crown is one of Europe's largest pork producers, although it's also a player in the beef market. Beef companies are coming under pressure to curb greenhouse gases, with 57% of all food industry emissions coming from making animal products. According to one study, tackling methane emissions from livestock is one of the most critical climate challenges for producers. A group of 3 nonprofit organizations in Denmark are suing Danish Crown for misrepresenting its climate footprint in a marketing campaign that says pork production is more climate friendly than you think. Now, granted, this is a pork producer saying something about beef, but he's not wrong. It's what they want. Remember, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said she wanted people to eat less hamburgers, eat less beef, drive your cars less. And so they've driven up the costs. A conscious decision. And now they're saying, it's not us. It's just transitory. It's because of COVID. They're blaming everything on COVID, and yet they're getting exactly what they want. How does that work exactly? They're getting what they wanted. Because it's by design. Because the higher prices curtail your travel and your beef consumption, which curtails your carbon footprint, which helps heal the planet. It's what they want. The problem is that's not a sustainable political position. And now the Biden administration, having curbed fossil fuel production, is having to beg the fossil fuel producers to produce more. I wish they would, but why should they help him? They're the bad guy, remember? They're the bad guy. And the more you use your fossil fuels to drive your SUVs like I do, we're the bad guys. And then there are the supply chain problems. The Washington Post, or no, it was the Wall Street Journal, did a deep dive about the Port of Savannah. I'm sorry, it was the New York Times. It's the New York Times. Did a very interesting story about the Port of Savannah, Georgia. The Savannah, Georgia port is one of the busiest ports in the nation. I think it's number 4 in the nation. They're expanding it. They're not even focusing on Los Angeles and Long Beach, which aren't running 24-hour ports. The Biden administration today is pressuring the longshoremen union in California to operate 24 hours a day. The longshoremen are resistant, but we got to get the supply chain in order here. And the supply chain issues are way more complicated than a lot of people would like to think. And of course, the angle from a lot of people in the media is, oh, well, we need more government coordination. Where is Pete Buttigieg in all of this? We have a Secretary of Transportation who seems to be nowhere. I guess he realizes it's an unsolvable problem at this point, and unlike Kamala Harris, doesn't want to jump in and try to solve an unsolvable problem and get blamed. So Pete Buttigieg is nowhere to be seen when these are transportation issues. We don't have enough truck drivers in the country, in part because of regulation. Remember, the Democrats want to boost a social welfare program to get more women to be truck drivers and discourage male truck drivers who we already don't have enough of. Because we don't have enough truck drivers, we have backed up ports. Because we don't have enough truck drivers coming to get the shipping containers. Because we have all the shipping containers sitting in the ports, we have a shortage of shipping containers in which to load new goods into to ship them into this country. Because the ports are full with the shipping containers because there aren't enough trucks to come get them, other ships are stuck offshore with shipping containers and can't come on shore because they can't unload. When they do unload, there aren't enough workers at the ports to inspect the shipping containers and process the shipping containers and put them on the truck. So the truckers who are available have to wait longer hours. They've got to hold still for 10 hours every day or else the government comes after them. All of these problems have cascaded into a global worldwide crisis. And then we have the problem of the waves of COVID coming. As a wave of COVID comes through Southeast Asia, those countries tend to shut down all of their manufacturing facilities and their ports while we've ramped up. And then they reopen and they catch up orders and we're ramped down. And so we've got a global situation where no one is in sync with each other. We got a lot of problems. Now, in fairness, as a matter of intellectual honesty, a lot of the problems we have are not governmental problems, nor are they created by the government. They are not Joe Biden's fault. Most people, however, will blame Joe Biden because it's happening on his watch. That's the nature of the game. The problem is that while these problems are not really Joe Biden's problems, he has complicated and amplified the problems by his policies that have driven up costs, by his policies that have crimped the supply of oil, by his policies that have undermined people's ability to go back to work or willingness to go back to work, by his policies that have overregulated and overburdened truck drivers in America, driving up their costs. Joe Biden did those things. So the initial problem isn't Joe Biden's problem. The initial breakdown of the supply chain, it's not Joe Biden's problem. But every time Joe Biden could do something to make the matter better, Joe Biden has chosen a path to make the matter worse. So it becomes his problem. We're going past Jimmy Carter to Herbert Hoover. Herbert Hoover, when he was president of the United States, saw the Great Depression happen, the stock market crash. And every action Herbert Hoover, who was supposedly a free marketeer, every action Herbert Hoover took for government intervention to fix the problems actually made the problems worse. People forget FDR's original New Deal programs, expanding federal power, because those initial programs actually made the problem worse. The central planners tend to make problems worse. And the Biden administration, like the Hoover and the FDR administrations, like the Soviet bureaucrats, have believed that central planning could solve the problem. And in fact, in the media, when they talk about the supply chain, they talk about needing greater central planners to plan out and map the supply chain. But we know it actually makes things worse. So there are a confluence of events, many of which are not Joe Biden's fault. But through dumping so much money into the economy, sparking inflation, curbing the availability and production power of the oil companies to produce gas, causing gas prices to rise, causing people to see farm prices, beef prices, and the like go up. So many of the problems, they weren't his fault to begin with, but he made them worse. And now they're his fault. And now people are blaming him, and he can't react quickly enough to solve the problem, so they're having to use the media to try to tell everyone that everything is okay. Nancy Pelosi is actually out blasting the media for not doing a good enough job of bragging about how the Democrats are doing.
News poll shows that only about 10% of Americans describe themselves as knowing a lot of specific things that are in the reconciliation package, and that the majority don't know anything at all. So do you think you need to do a better job at messaging, and going forward, how do you sell this if ultimately you have to?
Well, I think you all could do a better job of selling it, to be very frank with you, because every time I come here, I go through the list. Family and medical leave, climate, the issues that are in there. And but it is true, it is hard to break through when you have such a comprehensive package.
When you have such a comprehensive package, you just can't break through. The media needs to do a better job of selling the Democrats' agenda for them, to sell reconciliation, to sell the extra money they'll dump into the economy that everyone says will cause more inflation. At this point, they just seem to be grappling for stuff. And every time they grapple and every time they grab, they make the problem worse. And then, of course, they blame parents showing up at school boards for being domestic terrorists. It's really your fault, not theirs. That's the problem. Y'all, from the moment I sat in my X chair, my body said, this is what a real office chair is supposed to be like. I had gone through office chairs, and then I got my X chair, and it is the perfect chair. In fact, my X chair, unlike your chair, can massage my back while I'm sitting doing 3 hours of talk radio. It can even heat up and cool down depending on my office, which tends to run hot in the summer and cold in the wintertime. And it's all in the LMX massage and temperature regulation, exclusively designed for the X chair. And once you feel the customized support of X chair's patented dynamic lumbar, DVL, they call it, dynamic variable lumbar, your back's going to be happy. What I need you to do, you got to go check out the X chair, because I bought y'all know the expensive brand, and I bought it. It was a good chair. It actually was a really good chair, and X chair takes it to the next level. What you need to do is go to xchaireric.com now. That's X, the letter X, chair, ERICK.com, or call 844-4XChair for $100 off your order. X chair has a 30-day guarantee of complete comfort. You can finance your purchase for as little as $30 a month. It's xchaireric, ERICK.com. It is worth it. Hello there. It is Eric Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. To the phones we go. Let's go next to Gene. Welcome, Gene.
Eric, thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
I don't know how many people are aware of this number for gasoline. It's RBOB. When you look at the listing of prices for natural gas and crude oil and all that, the wholesale price for gasoline today is $2.37 a gallon. The difference is in Georgia, they add about 65 cents for profit and taxes. And if California is paying $5.50, then you know where over half the price of gasoline they're paying is caused by. It isn't caused by oil producers.
That's a really good point.
If Mr. Biden wants to reduce the price for the consumer, he needs to rattle some cages in California.
Yeah, he absolutely does.
And all the other high.
Yeah, look, Gene, thanks very much for the phone call. You're right. He does need to rattle, but he's not going to in that regard, because he's okay with those high prices. He just needs to look like he's doing something to lower them, because he knows you're not okay with high gas prices. Keep in mind, part of the Green New Deal is to cause inflation in fossil fuel prices to discourage people from using them. This is in the plan. It's crazy to me to see so many people out there act like this isn't part of the plan. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has repeatedly said that we've got to raise prices in order to discourage people from consuming, that we've got to do new things, that we've got to raise prices, that capitalism is bad in this regard. It's a problem that she said these things publicly, but she's telling the truth. This is what they think.
And now, Deep Thoughts by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Capitalism has not always existed in the world. It will not always exist in the world. When this country started, we were not a capitalist nation.
That was Deep Thoughts by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Those are her words. They're not mine. And she and Bernie Sanders, a communist who honeymooned in the Soviet Union, they're the ones developing the Green New Deal, and it's all about driving up your costs. Biden's gone along with it. He can do kabuki theater all he wants, but unless he really changes policies, gas prices are going to keep going up. It is Eric Erickson here. The phone number is 877-973-7425. Waiting very patiently is Kiefer. I'm going to go to him next. Welcome to the program.
Hi, Eric. I kind of wanted to put my voice out there. I'm a gay man, and I consider myself conservative, and I'd say gay instead of LGBT because I think that's so political, and people who use that are using it for political purposes. And those people, I feel, are the ones that are kind of are expressing the more extreme views, sort of like a drag queen story hour, or the transgender bathrooms, that whole sort of thing. And I don't think it really reflects the views of everyday common gay people, and I think that's being lost. And I guess, and the question I posed to the call screener was, if gays and lesbians have a place in the conservative movement, and I asked that question because I think sometimes there is kind of a lack of understanding about gays and lesbians, and I'm only speaking of gays and lesbians in particular, but there's a lack of understanding because when there's a conversation about us, it's kind of always in terms of sex, like that's the beginning and the end of us, like there's no other nuance to us other than that. And personally, for me, that's frustrating.
Yeah. Okay. So let me try to answer this one, Kiefer, and I apologize for the delay on the phones. It makes it hard to have a conversation, but this is a good question. And for those of you who don't keep up with these things, and he says gay as opposed to the alphabet. Let me give you where we are with the entire alphabet and why he is smart not to. It used to be LGB, and then it was LGBT, and then it became LGBTQ. Now it is LGBTTQQIAAP. And in some cases, 2. What does that all stand for? Lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, transsexual, queer, questioning, intersex, ally, asexual, pansexual, and then the number 2 for two-spirit. They keep adding it up. And you will notice that each of these are in some way defined based on their sexual preference. Is there a place in the conservative movement for someone who's gay? Absolutely. I have a number of friends of mine who are gay and in the conservative community. And you know what they all have in common? Not a one of them defines himself or herself by who they're having sex with. They are greater than their sexual preference. And I think someone in the gay community who defines themselves by greater than their sexual preference, yes. And do I agree with these friends of mine on every issue? No, of course not. I mean, I'm a conservative evangelical Christian. I do tend to still believe in the biblical definition of marriage. I recognize that civilly, though, that's not a fight that anyone's going to win on. So move on. There's a lot of stuff that a lot of people, regardless of who they're sleeping with, can find in common by their greater than their sexual preference. What I've noticed is and this is to Kiefer's point, a lot of the people who are most likely to define themselves as a progressive activist in the alphabet gang community is someone who really does define themselves by their sexual preference. And I actually think there are a good many people in the gay community who wind up voting for people on the right, whether they want to be open about it or not, because they don't define themselves by their sexual preference. They define themselves by being a doctor, by being a spouse, by being a parent, by being a lawyer, by being a careerist, by being a human, by being a citizen, by being someone in their local community who wants to improve their community. It's not about their sexual preference. It's about seeking to make the world around them better. And they resent like hell that there are those who want to just define them by their sexual preference. And so they move into the conservative community. Now, just as you're not going to have conservatives agree on everything about public policy, you're not going to have conservatives agree on everything about sexual preference. This is why I favor federalism. I think if someone wants to live in a community that supports traditional Christian values, they should be allowed to. If you want to live in a community that has drag queen story hour at the local elementary school, you should be allowed to. That's federalism. I may disagree with it, but part of what makes the United States great is that we have a freedom of mobility between 50 states, thousands of counties, where we can find people who think like us, and we can build a community around those people while also welcoming in the outsiders who come into our community. Unfortunately, because of Supreme Court precedent now, those outsiders are allowed to destroy everything built by the majority in a community. We should be allowed to live in a community where a majority consensus sets the values of that community. We should be able to respect each other's differences. And we should be able to not do the stupid thing that politically progressive states do, where they say, we're going to boycott the conservative state. I think that if you are someone who is gay or lesbian, and you look at Democratic policies and say, I am more than my sexual preference. I've got a career, I've got a good job, I'm an entrepreneur, or I'm an employee, I want to do well, I don't want the government to bother me. Welcome to the conservative movement. Glad to have you here. We'll teach you the secret handshake at the next meeting. It's a little weird. Come on board. It might as well. Now, that gets me to these differences, and I'm going to, I may slip outside the bonds of reasonableness for some of you here. I wrote about this morning. If you text the word data to 33777, you can click on my Substack and read it. I think some hands are being overplayed. I oppose government mandates for the COVID vaccine. And I oppose employer mandates for the COVID vaccine. And I oppose the government mandating corporations and businesses impose a vaccine mandate. And I oppose governments opposing business mandates and saying they can't do it. I think if a business wants to impose a mandate, I disagree with it, but it's their right to do it. But follow along with me here. My father-in-law got COVID. He had to go for an antibody infusion the other day. And the nurse told my father-in-law that she had 2 more antibody rounds she could give to people, and then she was out. Why, he asked? Well, she explained, the Biden administration is punishing Georgia, Florida, and other states for not imposing vaccine and mask mandates, and is therefore withholding from those states the antibodies that will save lives. They're redistributing them to other states that are doing vaccine mandates and mask mandates. The Biden administration is punishing Georgia, Florida, and other conservative states who have not imposed mandates. The Biden administration, you should know, denies this. The Biden administration says that they have a limited number of antibodies and they are assigning them proportionally based on COVID cases. It has nothing to do with these mandates. But then they're very nebulous about their proportionalism. I kind of tend to believe the nurse, frankly. Whether it's true or not, it's getting out there. But there are a lot of people doing a lot of things based not on truth, but on fear right now. You know, we really are the only Western country, really one of the only countries on the planet, requiring elementary school kids to wear masks, requiring toddlers on planes to wear masks. I'm not making that up. There is no science that shows it's worth doing. In fact, the science suggests the opposite. And yet we in this country are doing so. Because so many people who say they're following the science are actually basing their decisions on fear. And in so doing, they're overplaying their hand. They're increasing burdens instead of decreasing burdens. They can't let go. They're convinced we have to get to COVID zero, which we're never going to get to. We will not get to COVID zero. And yet they operate as if 95% of us need to get vaccinated before we can go outside our houses again. Well, you know what? In countries that have 95% vaccine rates, they're still getting COVID. In fact, the vaccine does work. I'm a big proponent of the vaccine. I am. I'm ready to get the booster. And if they tell me I've got to get it every year like the flu shot, I'll do it. It's not because the government controls me or because the government can control me or the government is telling me what to do. I think for my own health and the health of my wife and kids and family and those around me, I should be responsible and try to make sure I do not get a highly contagious disease, more contagious than the flu, that for senior citizens whom I'm around a great deal, I could wind up getting sick and putting in the hospital or killing. I'm perfectly happy to do that. It is a responsibility, I think, that I have to be a good neighbor and do that. If you disagree, that's fine. I don't care. I won't bully you. You don't bully me. But I'm a proponent of the vaccine. I'm just not a proponent of the mandates. A year ago, states locked down. Brian Kemp was excoriated by a lot of conservatives for locking down over what they considered a nothing burger, where they had yet to meet anyone who would die of COVID. At the time, hospitals in Georgia were overflowing with COVID. South Georgia was a disaster. People forget Albany, Georgia, Phoebe Putney Memorial Hospital down in Albany, Georgia, outside of New York, had the greatest per capita situation of deaths and cases of COVID. It was disaster down there. They were running out of supplies. They were having to convert parking decks into hospital overflow facilities. You didn't live there, so you didn't know, so you didn't think it was a big deal. It was a very big deal. And so the governor shut the state of Georgia down for a month. Other governors shut their states down as well. Brian Kemp in Georgia shut down the state of Georgia for a month so that hospitals could reprioritize, could not be met by a wave of COVID patients without getting enough supplies, enough PPE, enough ventilators, and it worked. A month later, he reopened the state. Even Donald Trump attacked Brian Kemp for reopening the state of Georgia. But Brian Kemp did it anyway. It worked. Sure, we had surges. Every state has had surges. Even the states with the mask mandates and the high vaccine rates, they're seeing surges and they're seeing hospital demands as well. It worked in Georgia. And I don't know if y'all have noticed in Georgia, in Florida, in Texas, in Louisiana, in Alabama, in Mississippi, in South Carolina, COVID rates are now about as low as they were at the beginning of the pandemic, around the time lockdowns were being imposed. They've fallen that much. It's really good news. And yet the media still attacks them and still demands burdensome things. When college football resumed Labor Day, pictures circulated of the massive crowds at stadiums around the country, unmasked, drunk college kids and adults watching college football. They're all going to die, people screamed. The media was outraged. Progressives demanded action. It's a super spreader event. Except it wasn't. It didn't happen. How many of the people who were so upset about those packed stadiums have come forward and said, hey, I got it wrong. Sorry. My bad. Turns out it wasn't bad. How many of them haven't? Most of them haven't. They've moved on to the next thing to be outraged about when it comes to COVID. They're not following the science. They're not following the data. They're not following the reality. They're just moving on based on fear. So I oppose the mandates. I oppose the corporate mandates. I oppose the government mandates. I oppose the government mandating corporations do it, and I oppose the government telling corporations they can't do it. Greg Abbott in Texas has now signed an executive order saying that no business is allowed to impose a mandate. And I think it's unconstitutional. I think it's silly. I think it's a re-election ploy that'll actually do nothing. But here's where I am on this now. If I got to choose between overreaction towards regulating us over COVID or Greg Abbott saying corporations, you can't do this, I'm with Greg Abbott. I'm with Ron DeSantis in Florida saying an employee can't lose their job because they refuse to get the COVID vaccine. If we got to overcorrect, we overcorrected in COVID because of COVID last year. So I think this year, as rates go down, as we have a vaccine, if we're going to overcorrect, because we're going to overcorrect, there's a reasonable middle ground, but no one wants to do it. If we're going to overcorrect, let's overcorrect on the side of individual freedom and responsibility and individual rights and allow people to live their lives. Put the burden on the people who've chosen not to get vaccinated. Let everybody out of their house. Get rid of the masks. Go back to normal. Why not, if we're going to overcorrect on the side of liberty? Because we overcorrected on the side of COVID last year. We went through lockdowns and masks and shutting down schools and Zoom calls. Well, we got a vaccine now. Things should change. And the hysteria is not living up to the science, where thousands, tens of thousands of people have been gathering in stadiums around this country to watch college football without causing super spreader events. It's time to get on with our lives. Now, as you're getting on with your life, you may decide you're tired of doing business with woke corporations. One of those corporations out there that you can do business with that is decidedly not woke, but is a Christian conservative business, is Patriot Mobile. They can be your cell phone provider, and they have great service. Don't believe me? Look at their coverage maps. Go to patriotmobile.com. They got a coverage map. You can see the link at the top of their site. And you can see they got coverage in rural areas. They've got data coverage. They've got cell phone voice coverage. They're a good company. They're Christians, conservatives, and they dedicate a portion of their profits to the conservative cause, to pro-life groups, to Second Amendment groups, to veteran first responder groups. Your money compounds with other people's money by using Patriot Mobile to advance the conservative cause. And you get great cell service as well. And if you use my name, you get free activation. So go to patriotmobile.com/Eric today, patriotmobile.com/ERICK. You can call them. They got 100% U.S.-based customer service, 972-PATRIOT. Tell them I sent you. Get free activation. patriotmobile.com. Sleep well at night knowing you are doing business with a company that shares your values and dedicates their profits to fighting for the causes you care about. patriotmobile.com/Eric. So, you want your news of the day that will just reassure you and make you think the world is all grand and glorious? Chernobyl has woken up. Yeah. The nuclear power plant, Chernobyl, that's been sealed off. The nuclear reaction has started again, and they don't know why. There appears to be an inaccessible room where nuclear material was stored, and they put new shielding around the reactor, and suddenly they're detecting an increase in neutrinos. They got a few years before it gets to critical mass. One of the things that they're speculating on is that water had been able to trickle in, and that water was able to help control the regulation of the reactions, and now the shielding is so good, no water can get in, and the reaction is starting to run unabated. So they got to figure it out. My goodness. I hope you sleep well tonight. We don't have to worry about it here for now. Famous last words, I guess. But something we should still keep an eye on. Now, I gotta get back to political news here. You know, the Democrats in Virginia, clear sign they think they're losing. They've started spreading out signs that say Youngkin equals Trump. They're trying to tie Glenn Youngkin, the affable Republican nominee for governor there, to Donald Trump. Probably isn't going to work. It's a sign of desperation, and they've got new signs of just how bad off it could be. Special elections really don't mean a whole lot. I get that. But the nature of how crowds are fired up. In Iowa, a state House district has flipped to the GOP. This district has been Democrat for 20 years. No one expected the Republicans to pick it up last night, and yet Republicans won that seat. It's just another data point that a wave is building against Joe Biden and the Democrats. Let's go, Brandon. Let's go.
With Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to... Has anyone seen the bride and groom?
Sorry, we're here. We were getting lucky in the limo and we lost track of time.
No, Lucky Land Casino, with cash prizes that add up quicker than a guest registry.
In that case, I pronounce you lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Daily bonuses are waiting. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.